So staying with news at Prime, both black and white Americans feel that people of color are treated less fairly by police and the criminal justice system as a whole. That's according to a 2019 Pew Research Center study. 84% of black respondents believe police treat blacks less fairly than their white counterparts. Now, that very same survey revealed that black adults are about 5 times more likely than whites to say they've been unfairly stopped by police because of their race or their ethnicity. The survey comes after a number of killings involving unarmed black men in the United States. Well, to speak about the relationship between African Americans and police in that country, we're joined by an African American man living in Johannesburg, Mark Blanton. Mark, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time.
No problem. I appreciate you guys calling me.
Yes, and I know that, you know, your experience, of course, will not necessarily represent the holistic experience, but you've done quite a lot of work within the security sector in the U.S. as well. I won't go far and divulge any more than that. But the point is that this is an industry that you have great insight into.
Yes, I do.
Let's talk about then the experience of, in particular, African Americans when it comes to police in the U.S. and why it is that there seems to be greater levels of not just policing targeted at them, but also aggression that seems to be accompanied by that.
It's several different topics, several different ways. Initially, the police, their whole job was to, protect property. That's why the police were initially put together. Over the years, their role have increased, meaning that they do have a lot of different areas that they do cover. But when it comes to African Americans, they don't look at us as part of the whole American experience, which is a growing thing. It's always a changing thing, and as we try to be part of it, they keep moving the bar, they change it, and a lot of times they just use the police to enforce their agenda. So to keep us kind of where we are, keep us behind the power curve, so to speak, and so they use police a lot of times.
The messaging around intimidation, in particular of black people, seems to be very deliberate. And when one looks at the research and the statistics when it comes to the level of incarceration, this is of minority groups in the U.S., and you compare that overall to the figures, something doesn't add up.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't add up. There's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it is that they do concentrate on the black communities most of the time. Some of the same things could be going on in other communities, but they spend a lot of time in the black community locking black people up, keeping them part of the criminal justice system, because it goes just beyond their interaction with the police. Now you got to interact with the judges, you got to interact with the whole legal system, and sometimes it's definitely an ongoing concern, and sometimes for your whole life, where you're consistently paying into it, either with your time or with your body or with the little bit of refund, the little bit of capital that you do have. So, yes. Yeah.
South Africans have recently, of course, been hearing of the story of Lindana Mieni, who was killed at the hands of police. And one of the things that his widow has said in the past week is that they were always worried about him potentially facing a moment like this. Number one, because he was black. Number two, because of how he was built. And that automatically became a concern for them as a family with him being in America. As a black man who has lived in America, talk to me about your own personal experience and what that, on a very real level, means to leave one's house being concerned about not just being stopped by the police, but also being killed by the police.
Yes, surviving those encounters are difficult. You can sometimes, especially if you have young children or even yourself, as you said, me, I have to worry about those things. When you get pulled over and the light comes on, you get extremely nervous. Some people do the flight or fight scenario. They go through that before the cop even comes up to the car. And most of us have had to talk at home with our parents and say, hey, this is what you do when you encounter the cop. And sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it doesn't end well, even though you did everything you were told to do, you did everything you were supposed to do. For some odd reason, they just decide that today is going to be your day. And that's the luck of the draw we deal with, even as an affluent black man or a person that isn't affluent. We all face the same fears.
What is the talk? I mean, I know what the talk is, but your own encounter, you know, how old were you when you first had the conversation, whether with your parents or you were having it with your family members, of what to expect?
Well, normally is when you first get a car, like for example, say I bought a car for my daughter because I have a daughter, or when I was a young person, you get a car and they tell you, you know, make sure when the cops come up to your car, make sure you have your hands on the steering wheel. Don't reach for anything. Say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Be very deliberate and being as cooperative as possible while you're having that traffic stop. Most people don't realize that the police in the United States have a lot of power when it comes to what they can do while they have you doing that traffic stop. They have a lot of power, and so they actually do use it. They use it to the full extent, as they say, of the law. And ultimately, what happens is you're going to trip up along the way. You might say something, you might do something, even though you have zero intentions, or like you said, you might look a certain way, you might have your hair a certain way, you could have had basically anything. And then if they decide they want to take it further, then they can. And so the talk is generally about how to de-escalate a situation from your perspective.
And do you get the sense that often these stop and go sessions, the stop and search sessions rather, are done in an effort to try and push you as far as possible? Because you've talked about de-escalating the situation.
Correct.
Police using their power in that moment to the fullest capacity.
Correct.
In a practical sense, what does that mean?
That means that if initially once they stop you, you're under their control. Even though their overarching job is to keep you safe. So they can, have you remove you from the car. They can tell you to put yourself in a position where it makes them feel safe. For example, they might say, okay, I want you to get out the car and I want you to separate you from your car and I want you to lay on the ground. They can do that. No issue. They can actually do that. At this point,
without you posing a threat at all, or giving any indication that you are a threat.
Without you posing a threat, because that puts you in a position of disadvantage and puts them in a position of advantage. So if they feel, it's just a feeling from their perspective, that it's best for them to get you away from your car and get you on the ground, or even handcuff you to determine what threat level you are, they can do that. Which, again, puts you in a situation of fear. And so they use that fear tactic a lot of times I'm going to say it like this, to start other events. Because at the end of the day, if they don't arrest you in the United States, they can't check your car. They can't go to do a search of anything unless they're arresting you. So they're going to try to figure out a way, put you in a situation where you will be arrested, or they can arrest you. And then at that point, they can go through your car, they can go through your trunk, they can check pretty much everything about you. But if they're not arresting you, all they can do is just do a pat down for safety reasons for themselves. And then after that, they have to let you go. So they in some cases, they do put you in situations where they have the opportunity to arrest you, and they know what the threshold is for arresting.
It sounds like it can be very dehumanizing, but also stripping of one's dignity.
Correct. It's not in private. It's in public. Sometimes it's right on the side of the road. Everybody sees you. And yes, it does. You do feel that way, especially if you haven't done anything and you know you haven't done anything. It puts you in a bad spot.
What do you think it's going to change? It's going to take to change some of these attitudes, these entrenched attitudes of how the police function?
Well, they've been trying to do that for, as long as I've been alive. I'm 50 plus. They've been addressing it, and on both sides, there's no give and there's no take. So at the end of the day, there's going to have to be some give. There's going to have to be some take on both sides. I would say that the police do need to look at their procedures and get back to community policing and being part of that community versus I'm a police officer, but I came from somewhere else. I don't know this community. I don't know these people. So I am afraid. So I'm going to use my fear as a police officer to invoke, my arrests, my whatever I feel like I need to do. And sometimes, is it justified? Sometimes it's justified to make an arrest, and sometimes it isn't. But as far as blacks are concerned in the United States, we are subject to that more than most.
Mark Blanton, thank you so much for coming in and for sharing that experience with us, and your personal insights. Mark Blanton is with therealsouthafrica.com.